Hey TV fans, Board now back with you. On this video I will be talking about The Handmaid's Tale Season 5 Episode 2. The episode is called Ballet. Full spoilers from the start of this review. So this feels like the second part of like a two-parter for the season opener, which is quite traditional. Like, officially it's a different episode title and everything, but it definitely has that feel, and it's completing like a sort of a setup from the previous episode, and that it's now laying the groundwork for the season moving forward, because it continues the theme of June and Serena in their individual like state of mind, and just their different reactions and contrasting reactions to what happened to Fred, his death and everything. It continues to parallel those, and that's a big thing in this episode. So from that point of view, it feels like this is like a two-part. This is the second half, and now we're gonna maybe move forward a bit with the story this season. But the dramatic end of this episode, which I will say is very dramatic, that really gives it the sense of we're moving forward now. There's some big stuff being set up here, so we'll see how it pans out, because obviously I'm in a bit of a murky place with the show and with this season. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen or how keen I'm going to be on some of this stuff. But couple more things that does give it this nice sort of link feel is then first of all, which I kind of rolled my eyes a bit at because it does feel a little bit cringe at times, this stuff, but we once again like open the episode with Dream a Little Dream, that song playing again, and June having memories of the past in Gilead, and this time because in the last episode she was having flashbacks to them brutally killing Fred, and this time her focus is more Serena, like she's having flashbacks to her time suffering at her hands in Gilead. And okay, so I'm not so hot on that scene. Again, it feels a bit over the top, a bit like cringeworthy a little bit, and really she's going back to that stuff, and I get what they're doing. It's this whole thing of, well, she made me suffer and now I've made her suffer, and just like contrasting that. Another thing is that Elizabeth Moss directs this episode, and she also directed the first episode of the season, and I know she's directed at least one other episode in the show, like I think one last season. So she's getting more into that, and that's something which, again, you would probably say feels a bit fit in with her very much being the lead in the show, and her being a real sort of creative force on it as a producer, and now directing a few episodes. So there's something to be said for that, as the way it links these two episodes. So I'll just say that her direction, I think, is solid. I think she does a pretty good job. There's some quite flashy direction, but some quite well done direction in the second half of the episode, in like the big set piece of the episode, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So her direction, I think, is pretty good, but the only thing I'd say about that is because of all this stuff revolving around June and Serena, and the way she's in the frame all the time and stuff like that, is it does give it a little bit of a self-indulgent feel. And once again, I'm kind of a bit tapped out on some of this stuff, and with June being so much the focus. But the direction, as I said, it is pretty good. So this episode literally just follows them through their day-to-day lives, and a big part of it is like Serena still refusing to accept some of the things about Fred, and still determined that then she will gain some respect and some power back, because she's now been seen as a traitor by many, by the commanders and the councils in Gilead, because of what happened towards the end with Fred and stuff. So, and because she's now a widow, she doesn't have the same amount of power anymore. But what happens is they have the funeral service in this episode, and it's arranged with the council, and Lawrence is involved, but because of the circumstances, like she's only given, it was obviously previously, it was only given like a, just a normal service, not to her liking, and she felt disrespected. So when she comes back from Canada, she starts talking about wanting like a proper, respectful, big national service for Fred. She wants, what it comes down to is she wants to send a message. So this episode digs a bit more into like the politics of that, and Serena once again being in denial about Fred and about the past and her role in this stuff, and wanting to just send a message to June. That's why it comes down to, because she knows this will be broadcast nationally, it'll get back to June somehow. So that's what this all comes down to, because of the way June has now hurt her and gotten at her. She wants a loud and clear message sent back. So we get into some of the, as I said, politics behind that, and now her position in Gilead. So Lawrence is in this episode quite a lot, and he's fantastic. I think he steals the episode with some of like his witty one-liners, because he's obviously this interesting character who still is a commander, and still to a certain extent is like under the rule, or like restricted by the rules of the land, but at the same time he does have this power, and he's a more sympathetic character who isn't so pro like the laws and what have you of Gilead's, but he, because it's like Bradley Whitford, and he's just so like witty and clever with some of his comments, it leads to some like really smart bang on sort of like comments. But it's like when they come, like Serena first comes in, and it's just, thank you for allowing me to bring Fred back for this, and like he just rather like funnily says, we wouldn't leave a brother out in the cold, and it's just that little sort of like smart little comment, which is almost like taking a pot shot, but just under the guise of being quite warm and friendly. So I really like that. And then he has a great line later about where he's, because in the end, like Serena forces his hand to like talk to like the other commanders to persuade them to give like Fred this big national televised funeral, and she blackmails Lawrence because she suspects that he had a part in what happened to Fred, and to like arranging the exchange and like helping out June. And at first Lawrence just, says there's no evidence and brushes it off, but Serena's threat and the fact that she could put him in some hot water potentially obviously does get through to him, and he's clearly not willing to take the chance that nothing will happen. So he does talk to the other commanders and pull some strings, uses his power, and gets her like her state funeral. And the line later is, then when she asks how he did it, says, well, because I'm not a woman, or I'm a man. Yeah, I'm not a woman, whichever way round. And it's just this great line which cuts to the heart of like the sexism and just how bad things are still in like Gilead. So it's just this line that says he understands all this. So that's pretty good stuff going on with them and the politics of the things, and what we build to is like this dramatic set piece where it's like cutting between the two locations, the two cities. So you've got June, who's going to a ballet with Luke, and this is a big deal because it's sort of her first big outing since returning home, and it's them going on their first proper date really post her coming back and returning from Gilead. And I don't know if it's meant to be her first ever ballet, possibly, maybe in having lived so much time in Gilead, she might never have experienced this, but it's like a really good visual, like, sort of scene, and just her experience in this. So it's well done, even though, again, it might linger on some of this stuff a bit much, but it's beautiful use of music and good direction, and it cuts back and forth between the locations of the funeral, but it does end with like a bit of a bang because they walk out into the centre, Luke and June, and they're holding hands. They've had a nice time at the ballet, and that's when they're confronted with it, and June especially, because she sees the state funeral on the big screens in the square, and this is obviously exactly what Serena wants. And it's very symbolic because like Serena, like the camera is like focusing on her walking, and you've got like Lawrence and a few others, and she's in a way like she's looking directly into the camera, like knowing that like June at some point will probably see it, or this will get back to her, but that's certainly what she's hoping. And yeah, the big gut punch for June is that Hannah's there. They've got Hannah, and she's obviously now a bit more grown up, like maturing, but this is the big shocking moments that just to add that little bit more insult to injury and make it more of a spectacle. Serena has actually got Hannah involved in this whole thing, and that's just devastating for June. And we end with the two features, the two like expressions, staring, and obviously June has like a dead stare. Once again, although it's well done, I do find some of this stuff a bit over the top, a bit, as I said, just a bit misery style porn, and there's just certain things I wish they sort of like move on from in some ways. Like there's stuff also with like Nick in this episode. We just get a small bit because now he's a commander and he's settled in with like a new wife, and he gets wind of, he's getting like updates about June, and you can see they're gonna like bring this back up again, the stuff between them in the past, which just feels like one of those things which has naturally played out now, because they had a big dramatic scene. I think it was last season. It was either last season or season 3. But anyway, they seem to have like resolved their storyline, and if they're just going to go back to it, that does feel like something which is going to become quite repetitive. But not bad, solid stuff in this episode. And the other like big storyline is that we return to Janine and Esther, and Esther has had her Handmaids training now, or she's going through it. We see it in the episode, and they found like a family for her, and the family I think is the same family that Janine was with, who she gave provided the baby to. So we see Aunt Lydia once again, and once again it's this strange sort of tone to these scenes, because Janine is encouraging Esther to like not to stir up any fuss, to just like advising on her how to like behave and how to like act as a handmaid. And it is very much like don't rock the boat, almost like just keep to the rules and you'll be fine, and just certain tips. And it's one of these things where you're not sure if she is just looking out for Esther, like she's just telling her this because it'll keep her safe and there's less chance of like stirring things up, or if it's just because she actually buys into this. Like, that's the scary thing, because of Janine's like state of mind and what have you, and the attachment she does have to like Aunt Lydia. It's possible that maybe she still, even after all she's been through, still like actually believes in this way of life and has been like seduced into this. So it's one of those, it's quite blurring the lines in the storyline. And in the end, like, there's a turn, because Esther, being very rebellious as she is, and she comes to the conclusion that Janine is just doing this just to like make a fool of her, and yeah, just because she's a bit of like a turncoat and a traitor, and she's just very self-centered is what she's saying. You don't care about me at all. And she basically has like suspicious about the whole system and everything. So there's this really good turn when they're on the bed talking and the conversation suddenly turns a bit nasty. And there's a scene earlier where she's offered chocolate by the commander, and it's a really creepy scene. I tell you what, a commander offering someone chocolate, I mean, who knew that could be so like sleazy, but it is. But that comes back into play because Esther actually poisons both of them with this chocolate. I don't know if they're saying like she slipped something into it, or, but anyway, it's poisoned, and that's the dramatic scene there, with them both collapsing on the floor, and then Aunt Lydia rushes in. So interesting to see where that one goes, because Janine's another character who's in a funny sort of place, where last season it looked like they might have finished her storyline off, and might have, it was obviously teased and she'd been killed in that explosion, and then that turned out not to be the case. And I like the character, but once again you have to wonder how much mileage they can get out of it, and if they are like dragging it on a bit too much. But there's some good stuff with Esther anyway. I quite like those two together. But so that's the episode, The Handmaid's Tale. I'll be back with episode 3 review soon, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel about the episode? Like and subscribe as always, and I'll be back with more TV and film reviews soon. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.